not only that, but particularly talking about something that is highly controversial. After my talk, you will see, and I want to be a little bit away from them so they can't hit me. Next generation devices. She gave me that topic, and I was wondering what exactly she wants me to talk about. New devices on the mitral. We all know there are not many new devices, but I try to do my best. That hasn't changed from my first talk. And, you know, just let us be reminded that painfully we learned that the mitral valve is very different from the aortic valve. The aortic valve doesn't have papillary muscles, doesn't have chordae, doesn't move in a three-dimensional space, at least not as much as the mitral valve. And I think what you can see on the left side tells you almost everything about that particular structure. There's an expanding portfolio of transcatheter mitral valve repair and replacement, summarized on this slide. There's chordal replacement, neocord harpoon, leaflet repair, the clip and Pascal, and annuloplasty cardioband, direct and indirect, the Carillon device, and of course then the combo procedures that might be actually more important as time goes by. So the repair therapy, and that can be done fairly quickly. The landscape is changing, as we all know. The data so far showed good safety performance, but definitely need improvements in efficacy and user-friendliness. Real milestones have only been achieved by the edge-to-edge technique of the mitral clip, and that's shown on this slide. So if we look at mitral valve repair, new devices, I picked two actually, and this one is important. Percutaneous chordal repair, not much has happened. The transapical devices keep enrolling, doing more cases, but the real transition from transapical to transeptal has not been achieved yet. And the chordate and pipeline, as you well know, are very early in their stage. But neocord was actually able to transition from transapical to transeptal, the neocord nexus, and I would like to give you here the first cases that have been done. 3 patients successfully treated, discharge at day 4, significant MR reduction achieved, and for maximum trace, actually you will see this in a second, and it has durable and stable anchoring at the papillary muscles. So that's a real step forward. And here you can see the pre-implant. You can very nicely see on the left image the prolapse. And on the right side, you can see the prolapse is going to go away, or did go away with that particular device. And here you can see in color the result, actually very good, very promising. So I think that's really a step forward. The other one that may be interesting because it's a new approach is Eberhard. And you can see here it is actually a ring and a central valve which will be assembled. The special thing about this ring is that you reduce it to a given size. And that's an interesting approach because it reduces the mitral annulus and stabilizes the mitral annulus, and then you can assemble it. They've done the first cases, and we will see what the results are. But I think that's an interesting approach that compensates for the variability in mitral annulus sizes. And then we come to an interesting topic, which is obviously replacement. We know the goals and the challenges of TMVR. We don't need to underline this: ease of implantation, agnostic to etiology, reliable elimination of MR, and less recurrence of MR. There is, as we all know, in the real-world scenario, high screening failure rates. We know that, and we also know why that is, but it's still there with all the devices out there. And this is the most interesting, at least now for the time being, because we're talking about new devices. So if we look at the left side, transapical devices, Tendyne, Intrepid, and Tiara, nothing new on that front, except they keep on enrolling. CE Mark US pivotal is ongoing. On Intrepid, CE Mark study complete, and US pivotal. Tiara, CE Mark study complete. These 3 devices keep enrolling, nothing new, not new devices. On the lower part, we can see the transeptals. Sapien M3, as you well know, is the device from Edwards, The feasibility study with pivotal has been approved, hasn't started yet. High Life actually is gaining some traction. They've done more cases, enrolling 34 patients at this point with good results. And interesting, Intrepid Transeptal and Evoque EOS, AC, Cephea, and Cardiovalve. Cephea, as you know, has been acquired by Venus, China, and Cardiovalve, they keep enrolling Cardiovalve has been acquired, not Cephea. Cephea is Abbott's valve. And then I think the two that are interesting to show to you is Intrepid Transeptal and Evoque EOS. Intrepid Transeptal has been presented by Dr. Zar at TCT. The good news of these replacement devices are if they are implanted successfully, then they really eliminate mitral regurgitation. That's clear. I said before, the failure rate, the screening failure rate is still high, and that is true for all the devices that are summarized here. So this is Medtronic's Intrepid Transeptal system. You can see this here. Dr. Zar has talked about this device. The first patients have been done, and they have been discussed at TCT. They learned a lot. Good news is, as you can see, 30 days elimination of mitral regurgitation. And the 15 patients that have been reported at 30 days of this EFS study, 2/3 is degenerative mitral regurgitation, 1/3 functional, no mortality, stroke reintervention, new pacemaker implantation, favorable hemodynamics with almost complete elimination of MR at 30 days, improved NYHA class, and technical success rate, high 93%, 1 conversion to surgery. But due to the large size of the sheath, ASD closure and 3D bleeding are a little bit high, so that has to be resolved. FDA approved to add this transeptal delivery to the Apollo pivotal US trial. That's a good news for them. Evoque, as you know, changed from mitral to tricuspid, now with Evoque EOS, back to mitral. Evoque EOS is a redesign of the classic Evoque device, fully retrievable and recapturable, evaluated within EFS and has just started. The MySense study is being on the way. This is Edwards Evoque mitral valve replacement system, and they investigate the safety and performance after mitral valve replacement with that particular device. So the future, I believe, and it summarizes what needs to be done in order to at least be competitive, repositionability and transeptal delivery, minimal anatomic exclusions, and improved imaging. New innovative solutions, posterior leaflet enhancement replacement. Posterior leaflet enhancement replacement is a new focus for this area. Interesting new devices, Polaris, Sutra, and Half Moon, all early in their experience with a learning that has to be done, but nevertheless, I would like to present them to you because it's something out of the box that we can see. The Polaris is here. You can see the Polaris basically screwed in with 5 screws, and the baffle with PTFE. The first cases have been done in Germany, Switzerland, and in South America. And you can see here successful first case with elimination of mitral regurgitation, pre and post also seen here. So we will see more, hopefully more good results, interesting approach. Then the Sutra approach, it's a 3-leaflet half-valve design with atrial anchoring. Basically, as you can see, the posterior leaflet is replaced by a PTFE, by artificial PTFE leaflets that are optimizing the coaptation of the anterior valve. And you can see here the 4D CT from an animal study that the neo leaflet is coapting well with the anterior leaflet. We'll see how that one works. And then I'm sure you've heard about Half Moon, the coaptation augmentation device consisting of a clip, a baffle, and the brim. The brim actually anchors the device in the atrium. The baffle protrudes into the orifice area in order to improve the coaptation, and the clip anchors the device in the subannular space. You can see here the baffle is designed to swing anteriorly during systole, as you will see here, and the clip and the brim work in tandem to provide fixation. Interesting approach, and the first cases have been done also by Dr. Zar. Altogether, 4 cases have been done so far. The device is being redesigned, and here you can see the first post-implant results, pre and post-implant. So is TMVR ready for prime time? And obviously it's a hot topic as far as discussion is concerned. I believe the answer is no. A lot remains to be done in order to be this being a prime time device. We still are far away from calling them successful in terms of competing with surgery. So where are we actually after 15 years? And you can see here that was the market expectation, and you can see the numbers and the dollars that have been spent, around 50 million USD per patient for transcatheter mitral valve treatment, and you can see a lot of them is going down the tube. Then repair and replacement, obviously competitive, complementary. What is there? The mitral valve repair issues I have summarized, and obviously is my personal opinion here. The TMVR repair landscape is changing. Devices are relatively safe, but efficacy and user friendliness have to be improved, as we all know. The results so far have been disappointing. Real milestones, as I said before, only by the edge-to-edge technique, which, however, has its own limitations, as we also know. In the near future, the number of TEER will increase, no question about that, almost by default, but other innovative solutions will probably emerge, and we also need that. Why is TMVR still an unresolved issue? In 2015, 3 TMVR technologies for transapical delivery acquired for $1+ billion. In 2016, the cardiology community concluded future of TMVR is transeptal. In 2021, limitations remain important. Current devices still have one or several of the following shortcomings: pure transapical applicability. When transeptal, the French size is large. Persistent paravalvular leaks, valve leaflet thrombosis, difficulty in achieving an adequate position consistently. The devices cannot accommodate for large anatomies and cannot treat LVOTO risk patients. Currently, clinical studies still have to identify the ideal patient population. As I said, the screening failure is still high. So why did we still migrate to valvular replacement? For multiple reasons. Repair is longer and more complex procedure with technology that was developed slowly, and as we know, with questionable efficacy so far. We enjoyed being in a comfort zone of doing TAVR in 45 minutes, so why not replicate it in mitral? The industry also resented to move from the comfort zone of making TAVR devices, as you all recall when we started this journey. We're holding until MR becomes severe to treat these patients. No alternative drug therapy exists to date, so that the gold standard remains surgery. The result, after 15 years, we still don't have a TMVR device that is ready for prime time. I would like to still make a case for the development of catheter-based therapies. Surgery, at least up till now, is the standard of care for patients with severe symptomatic MR. TEER has demonstrated beneficial outcomes in prohibitive, high-risk primary MR and selected COAPT eligible secondary MR patients. Other important and maybe even more frequent MR patients categories have not been studied. An optimal MR reduction with TEER remains challenging in patients with complex anatomies. The high-risk MR population therefore represents big opportunity for catheter-based innovations. Severe MR and heart failure in the elderly is highly prevalent, frequently rejected from surgery, not represented in surgical trials, and frequently rehospitalized. Catheter-based technologies actually may or have to improve procedural outcomes in these high-risk group patients. Less invasive mitral valve intervention may be performed with fewer period of complications. Progression towards minimally invasive interventions impact clinical outcomes, quality of life, and healthcare cost. So, a call from the battlefield, from my battlefield, to further understand all aspects of the mitral disease and its needs. We have to get out of the box and out of the zone of comfort to become creative in identifying and implementing new approaches and better solutions to this unmet clinical challenge for low-risk patients. There are no limits to what you can accomplish, except the limits you place on your own thinking. With that, I would like to thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Eberhard. That was terrific and inspiring, but I would ask you,
Sure.
It seems like innovation and new ideas has not really been what's holding the mitral space back. In fact, there have been over 60 different devices that have been developed. We've got spacers, neocords, posterior leaflet replacement. I mean, what's really been the issue is the complexity of the mitral valve, right? And how hard it is to do from a transcatheter approach. We don't have the flexibility of all the different approaches the surgeon has when they are in there. So, what do you see as a real solution?
Well, I mean, that's actually what I would like to stimulate. That's why I gave this talk. Because I think what we have done is we try to duplicate the surgeons, and we have not done this well. I know, and I've talked to many people about this talk actually, and they all said stay away from the clip. Because number one, you can't argue the data. Seibel and I met in Denver, and he always bashing me when I said way back, the clip is a Band-Aid, and it doesn't probably address the fundamental problem. We'll see. As time goes by, we can't ignore and we cannot deny the results. But I think for a large group of patients that are not being treated or possibly treated with the clip, we need to have other solutions. And I think that's what we have tried. We have tried, as you said, many valves, and we tried to mimic surgeons, and we are just not as good as the surgeons are. We have many issues that I summarized there, so we're not really doing quite well with replacement. Outside this, replacement actually is only 20-30%, and we try to not replace the valve, but to repair the valve. And percutaneously, we're just not as good, let alone the clip. I mean, the clip is not a topic right now.
So let me be provocative and get comments from Raj and Seibel and anybody else. And I would argue that in secondary MR, the problem is lack of coaptation, and that is what the clip approaches. So I actually think, let me finish. I think that is the solution to secondary MR. Primary MR, lack of coaptation is a late issue, and obviously that's not the primary problem. That's where we really need help with, but arguably we were always taught from surgical experience, repair gives you much better long-term results than replacement, and we don't want to anticoagulate patients. So let me hear, I'll give you the last word, but let me hear from Raj and Seibel about what they really think the future is going to look like within 10 years.
I think that the limitation of clip is that you're distorting the anatomy. Yes, you're getting rid of the lack of coaptation, but the degeneration will continue and there will be new spots also, right, that may degenerate in the valve. So I think, but there are some other interesting technologies like percutaneous neocord, that actually keep or preserve the anatomy, and they can actually, we've seen some very, very early stuff. I actually think that is where the field might be moving. And not all degenerative MRs can be repaired, right? Because the surgeons right now replace more than half of those patients. We're not talking about the isolated prolapses and flails. So I actually think that there is a big role for percutaneous mitral valve replacement. All that is being done surgically in terms of replacement should be a target for percutaneous mitral valve replacement, and that is a big chunk of patients.
I think the best bioprosthetic valve in the mitral position is your own valve. It, right? You can, and nature made it for a reason. It didn't make it a valve. It made it cords, papillary muscle, leaflets. And then you're trying to replace that with a tri-leaflet mechanical thing. It's not the same. So that in general, I believe that if you can preserve the mitral valve in any way, it's actually better for the patient. So when you take two groups, say functional MR, as you rightly said, there is no problem with the leaflets. Right? There is no problem at all. So there's no damage of the leaflets. So just bringing them coapting them together, whether you do with a ring or a clip or a ring and clip together, should work, and it is working. When it comes to degenerative MR, when it comes to damaged leaflets like rheumatic, endocarditis, calcified, I think you should replace them. And for patients with primary and degenerative MR, where you have an isolated prolapse of flail, cords, and I think new cords will have a role. I think there's going to be a role. And the clip's not going to go away. No matter what you like, it's not going away. It's going to be Band-Aids never gone away, right? You still use Band-Aids, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is an extensive discussion, obviously, and the reason why I did this was to exactly, stimulate the discussion, because I do not believe there's one point really missing with the clip. The disease is not the leaflets, as they said, and reducing the orifice is not addressing the fundamental problem, which is the left ventricle. You reduce the flow, you reduce the orifice, but however you see it, the left ventricle doesn't remodel. I cannot argue with the results, and I don't want to, because it is a tremendously important study, and for the first time, something has been demonstrated that was not demonstrated before. I very much question, however, the long-term results, and if you talk to the surgeons, obviously, they have a different opinion, because I think one thing is missing, that's a stabilization of the mitral annulus, and I think that's something that we have to pay attention to.
Well, I just remind everyone in secondary MR, as you say, the problem is not the mitral valve. It's not the leaflets, it's not the annulus, it's not any part of the mitral valve, it's actually the ventricle. Yeah. And so none of the approaches, including mitral valve replacement, is going to fix the left ventricle. So we need, yes, maybe basal annuloplasty will for some of those approaches, maybe Accucinch, et cetera, but we need new heart failure therapies for LV dysfunction, which are also coming.
Yeah, but we need, and that's why I said, think a little bit out of the box. Don't develop more mitral valves, because we will still be able to trouble the problems. At the end of the day, you don't want to have an artificial valve. You want to have a repaired valve.
Right, exactly. So, that's the question for DMR. If I'm a low-risk patient, and if I can have a repair by David Adams or by Vinny Boppet with a 99% chance of having a great repair, would I rather have that than avoid surgery to have a transcatheter mitral valve replacement? I'd probably take the surgery. Yes. Right? Yes. Howie?
The only thing I'd add to this discussion, which I think you've brought up all the points, is that all of our transcatheter replacements, none of them actually mimic exactly what surgeons do when they replace a valve. All of our valve replacements for transcatheter are bigger. They push on the annulus instead of pull it in. They have a larger profile, which takes up volume in the left ventricle. So, equating transcatheter replacement to surgical replacement may not be fair either.